One of the reasons that Mark wanted to have this conference is because he had heard a podcast from Church Answers, Tom Rayner and his son Sam Rayner, about bullies. Bullies create conflict. Bullies don't necessarily have to be male, they can be female as well. That's not really the issue, okay? But the fact of the matter is, this particular podcast intrigued me because their findings were from pastors who overcame the bully. And they gave 5 things that they actually found that helped in overcoming this particular kind of conflict. Now, I don't know anybody here. Did you guys actually listen to the podcast? Okay. What's that?
I listen to Rayner sometimes, but not this one.
Okay, all right, well good, because I'm going to give them to you, and I'm going to save you about a good 35 minutes of just Tom and Sam just going back and forth on a bunch of other stuff, okay? Because this is the nuts and bolts of everything. Because I really think the bottom line is the reason that we're here is that we always want to try to find peaceful resolutions, peaceful relationships, and by doing that, we need to have biblical wisdom, prayer, and heartfelt adoration towards Jesus Christ, who demonstrated for us the greatest love of all. Okay, and so let me give you these real quick. All right, and we'll talk about them just for a minute. Okay, so Rayner said that with these pastors that they interviewed that overcame the bullying in their churches, they had this what they called the principle of an allied patience. In other words, is that they had a tactical patience. They waited for the right time. They did have strong allies. They found the people within the church that had their back no matter what, just in case they were needed, which I'll get to that in a minute. But the fact of the matter is that they would proceed on their time frame, not their, if I can use the term, opponent or the bully's time frame. All right, so that was allied patience for them. The second thing that they said was this, is that they were willing to play the long game. You will find, especially when it comes to bullying or trying to create havoc within the church, bullies like the spontaneous or the catching you off guard, like the guy who came into my office on a Sunday morning just before I was going to preach. He thought he would have the upper hand. Other issues, but the long game is this. I can't tell you how many pastors have gone through conflict and then left, or gone through conflict and their entire attitude and posture about the church changes. What you need to do is you need to be settled in your heart and in your life, that bottom line, that God called you there, and God will take you away from there when it's His time, not your time. And nobody can take you away from that. Not even the bully. Okay, because the bottom line is this: you will get to the other side, believe it or not. Even in the midst of struggles, you will get to the other side. But you need to have a determination that you are in it for the long haul. Okay? Because as soon as that one's done, guess what? Another one will probably rear its ugly head. All right? So, not only an allied patience, but in it to play the long game. But the third one is this, and we've already talked about it some, is that they had prayer coverage. Again, if you don't have a prayer team or a prayer group, then I would suggest that you go find those people today. All right? That you begin to ask the Lord who it would be that you would want to have speak into your life and have them pray for you on a regular basis, and that you could call them anytime, day or night, and they're going to get on their knees before God in the throne room praying for you. You need to have those prayer warriors. I had three people other than my wife that, it didn't make a difference. They told me over and over and over, anything you need, Pastor, I will go to prayer for you. That was huge, because that was one of the things that I just knew that I had people on my team. And they weren't in it necessarily for me, but they did have my back. But it was more for them to make sure that God was not diminished at all in whatever the church was going through. Okay? Here's one that I struggled with a little bit, but I understand it. These pastors said that they were willing to risk short-term losses. They were willing to risk short-term losses. Like I said before, bullies are good at the immediate catch you off guard kind of attacks. And it may be that you're willing to take a short-term loss for the long-term gain. Okay? And that's okay. There are hills to die on. There are hills not necessarily that you want to take. Okay? You have to determine what those are. If you're a part of that group that makes all the decisions in the church, the color of the paint, color of the carpet, the decorations for the church, I'm going to tell you right now, God did not call you to do that. Find somebody else to do that. You may be an ex officio person on that group or team. That's fine. But at the end of the day, to you, I'm going to tell you this. It doesn't matter. Okay? The plant that I'm a part of, we haven't even launched yet. We're talking about colors. I could show you pictures of the way we found the building. Okay? But then obviously people started, especially the women, said, well, we need to paint. I said, you know what? I agree. The other two pastors said, yep, we agree. So guess what came up next? What color? I am not lying at all. We had a long wall that's a solid wall. In the corner of the wall, we literally had 30 swatches of colors. 30. That was not a hill for me to die on. I said, you know what? Looks like you all got it. You guys make the decision. The other two guys said, and of course they're younger than I am, they weren't quite willing to give it up yet. And I told them, I said, guys, let them handle it. That's why we put them in the position to do that. Let them handle it. Now, if it's some crazy color that just is not going to go with the rest of what we're getting, that's fine. We can talk about it then. So anyway, things like that, I don't care. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I'm not going to waste time on it. Okay? I'm telling you, you can do the same thing. Listen, early on in ministry, and Dave's probably heard me say this before, when I learned how to spell the word delegate and understood what it meant, I took advantage of it. That saved me a lot of heartache. Although I do have gray hair, it really saved me from losing my hair. You know what I'm saying? All right. The last one is this, is they fought with grace. They fought with grace. In other words, it's not your own agenda, but what you're doing is that everything that comes out of your mouth, especially in a conflict, is going to be analyzed. And so everything that you say needs to be done with grace. Matter of fact, you remember the verse before, it says, speak the truth in love. We need to do that. You need to be very precise in what you say and in how you say it. Not necessarily just for your sake, but for the benefit of the people around you. It demonstrates, in my opinion, I believe it demonstrates biblical posture. And that you're trying your best to fulfill your role as pastor in what the Word of God says about how you need to respond. Okay? I mean, good grief, there's a ton of conflict in the Word of God, right? I mean, conflict's been around since pretty much beginning of time. Matter of fact, even before this was created, there was conflict in heaven. There was a few people got kicked out, right? So conflict has been around it is simply going to be a part of our lives. And like I said early on, depends on how you interpret it and how you manage it will depend on the resolve. Okay? All right. Any questions regarding that? Yeah.
I was going to make a comment. One of the important things I've learned is the word tone.
Yes. Yes. Matter of fact, if I get there, that's one of the things I was going to talk about because not only verbal and physical posture is huge. You've been in all of those classes before, you know. My wife tells me all the time, would you smile? You look like you're mad, you know. Or you cross your arms, she'll say, drop your arms. Or, you know, I have a tendency to do this, like that, or, you know, I cover my mouth. And she goes, stop. That speaks volumes. I go, no, this is a comfortable position for me. You know, it has been. It wasn't. I was always like that, you know. But that is huge, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So I thought we were about getting ready to get into worship here. I heard that. Yeah. Da, 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 da. So anyway, all right. So any other questions or comment about those 5 things? I really appreciated, Mark, the lead on that. And and let me tell you this right now, and for the folks that are on the video, I'll send Mark my PowerPoint, and if you want all of my notes, I'll send you all of those as well. You can use them, cut them up, you know, use them as kindling, whatever you want to do as a fire starter, or use it, okay? Because I have been given permission to use the stuff that I have, and so I'm just simply giving it to you because I believe it's for the benefit of everybody that hears it. Yeah, Jimmy?
Yeah, I also, I know we're talking about outlasting or overcoming bullies, but isn't there a goal to gain a brother to, I wouldn't say get them on your side, but to invest in their own personal sanctification?
Absolutely. That's part of Matthew 18, 15, you know, because at the end of that verse it says, go to that individual because they've sinned against you, and that if they hear you, it says you have gained a brother. Okay? Which, yeah, I mean, the whole Matthew 18 thing, is for reconciliation. It really is. But it doesn't stop at verse 15. It moves on to say that reconciliation may have to turn into discipline, but it's done in a biblical manner so that they understand it, that the church understands it. Now, listen, way back in the day before I was part of the Southern Baptist Convention, I was at a conference. It was a Baptist conference, but the individual that spoke that day, I mean, he was gloating, literally. There's no other way to put it. Gloating on how many people that they disciplined and kicked out of their church because they wouldn't adhere to whatever it was they were doing. Okay, I'm not saying that. I don't believe that's glorifying. But yeah, I believe that we ought to be about, if at all possible, about reconciliation with that brother, with those people. I had a dear friend of mine, pastored here in Ohio. He's no longer in Ohio, and led the church through a building program. I mean, they were blowing and going. Within 2 years of that new church and all of that, he had an entire Sunday school class rise up against him. An entire Sunday school class, about 60 people who rose up against him, and he just couldn't fight it. He didn't have the backing from others, and so it was like him against the world, so to speak, and it just wore him out, wore his wife out, and he ended up having to leave. Unfortunately. I mean, I told him, I said, dude, you really should have stayed. I mean, you should have called and even got outside people to come in and be on your side. But anyway, so sometimes those things happen. But we need to try to do our best, if at all possible. And to make sure that they understand that. Even at the time, if you and I are on opposing sides, I mean, your conversation to me, say, look, man, I am looking for resolve here. I want to retain you as a brother. I want us to be able to work together. Like the guy that said to me, he said, I'll be here. I was here when you came, and I'll be here when you're gone. I said, yeah, but until then, you and I are working together. Okay? And we did. And we did. Sometimes it was easy, other times it wouldn't. But because really, a lot of times what happens is, again, like I said before, it's a lack of communication, lack of understanding, and their processing. Like we were talking just before the camera came back on about COVID, you know, the processing portion, you're already at one position, they may or may not be. And so you have to value where they are and say, look, all right, I'll walk alongside you till you get there. I'll answer any question you have till you get there, okay?
And I have another question if you have time for it.
Yeah, let's go.
Related. You know, I think about Acts 1, end of Acts 1, when Judas talks about him hanging himself, and I just think about the implications of how they believed that he was a disciple, true disciple, right? It was a surprise to the disciples there, and of course it was greed and a misunderstanding of who Christ was. We have people like that in our church that look and act and say the right things, but they are unsaved. They're not sanctified. If that's a church bully and everyone thinks that they are saved, they've served the church for 50 years. How do you go about that? I mean, I'm 2 years in
Right.
to revitalization. I mean, how would I go about confronting that issue?
That's a great question. It's a tough question. And so for those that are on the video, because I want to make sure I capture what you ask, is you've got an individual who's kind of sort of more like a Judas, to where he was part of the 12.